Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Final Call radio show here on your source for cool jazz and more, WEAA 88.9 FM and WEAA.org, the voice of the community. I'm your host, Brother Farajii Muhammad. Tonight we have a fantastic and very insightful show for you. We're going to be talking about education. That's right, education on so many different levels. We have our very special guest, Dr. Oya Maa't, in the studio, along with some other very special guests from the Meltrek team and, of course, educators. And we're going to just really get into it as we're talking about the education of black children, talking about what is happening right now to combat or challenge the current educational paradigm in our city and across the country. We'll talk a little bit about what's been happening in Charlottesville as we talk a little bit about race relations in America and so much more. So tonight, we're going to have a very, very full conversation, and we want you to be involved. Make sure you let your friends and your family know that on tonight, we got Dr. Oya Maa't and family to talk to us about education and everything relating to the next generation. It's all happening on tonight's edition of the Final Call radio show here on your source for cool jazz and more, WEAA 88.9 FM and WEAA.org, the voice of the community. We'll be right back. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Final Call radio show here on your source for cool jazz and more, WEAA 88.9 FM and WEAA.org, the voice of the community. I'm your host, Brother Farajii Muhammad, joined by my wonderful co-host, Brother Anthony Pena. Brother Student Minister Carlos Muhammad is on assignment in Chicago. Allah willing, we'll be hearing from him next week, of course, because the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has given another powerful word as he spoke about seeking refuge in Almighty God, Allah, especially in this very, very trying and dark time that we are living in this country. Very, very powerful message. We'll get a chance to play the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan a little bit next week because we're going to have a very special conversation this week. But look, check it out for yourself. NOI.org is where you want to see the minister, and you can check out what he had to say today. 84 years old, still bringing it. But most importantly, as he has always said, nothing is more valuable in a dark period than right guidance. And that is certainly what he brought to us today as he talked a little bit about everything, about really it was a very spiritual message more so than a very social political message. But it was a message that certainly spoke to what we were going through right now, because there's a lot of uncertainty in Black America and nobody can help calm the fears or at least get us back on focus like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So check out NOI.org, and next week, Allah willing, we'll get a report from our beloved student minister to give us an insight as to what the minister said in public as well as a little bit of what he said in private. But tonight, we're going to have another conversation. It's right along the same lines because as we talk about what's happening all across this country, there is a growing uncertainty about what's going on in some people have framed it as the killing fields, while others say the schools where that's the greatest weapon of mass destruction takes place, in the minds, in the classrooms where our children are being taught. And I'm so happy to have my wonderful co-host here who is an educator and is on that front line each and every day, not just in the classroom, but also in the streets as he does mentoring. Brother Anthony Pena. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Anthony. How are you?
Walaikum salam, sir. Fine.
Good. Brother Anthony, I know this is going to be a very near and dear conversation to you. You are an educator in the Baltimore City's public school system, but you have had a variety of experience in teaching Black children. But what would you say right now is the current state of education for black children?
If he did a report card grade, if he can find something lower than F, it will be that. The reality is that for years now, talk about decades, black children and Latino children have been oppressed for years. We have crumbling school system. We have crumbling curriculum. We have this thing.
Crumbling school system and curriculum.
Yes. If people talk about Flint water, but Baltimore City schools have not allowed to have water since 2007 because it was found to have lead in 2007. So we're going over 10 years now where we have to get water from Deer Park, which means we're giving our resources money to a company to bring us water at selected dates a month where they come deliver water to children. If they can't get basic water, we know they can't get a good education if they can't even get water. The bathroom itself is horrible if you go to most schools. You have teachers where 80% of the teaching staff in Baltimore City schools are white females for the most part. You have seen a decrease in black teachers come into the system. They have left the system. Principals have left the system because they have no support and little finances. So the state of the fair right now is the F in Baltimore City schools.
Wow. That's big right there, Brother Anthony, considering all of the challenges. And some people would say that we are on the pathway or on a path to making some progress. But if you are native of Baltimore, we've been down this road before. We have always heard the conversation about, making some great strides and making progress. And then every so many years, there is a big reminder, whether it's financial, whether it's in the curriculum, or whether it's in the graduation rate, there is always a reminder to bring us back down to reality to say that the educational system is no longer sufficient. Now, we're going to have this conversation, but this is not a conversation to beat up on what is currently in place, but there has to be a real conversation at this point to determine if we're going to make a change. Can we do it in a way that's going to help to alleviate some of the fears? A lot of us, and I want to bring my very special guest and our family into this part, because a lot of us look at education and we see it as one way. And that's one of the big issues that we're finding. So I want to bring in my special guest because I want to get her thoughts as well as some other members here of the team, their thoughts about where we are, or really what should be proper education. I'm so happy to have our very special guest, Dr. Oya Maa't. She's in the studio with us tonight. She is an author, she's a lecturer, she's a scholar, but most importantly, she's a mom. She understands the system. She understands the system. She understands what's going on in dealing with black children. And so she's more than just what you may have seen on YouTube and what you've seen on social media. She is a concerned black woman that's wondering, what is the future going to look like? So I am so happy to have Dr. Oya Maa't. How are you doing, dear sister? Peace and blessings.
Peace and power, brother. I'm so happy to be here in the studio. And this is going to be a wonderful topic tonight. And this is a topic that is nearest and dearest, to my heart. And as you stated before, it's not just me here. I have a whole family.
Yeah,
my family's here. I have to my right, I have my mom who.
Your mom?
Yes, my mother. My mother who who gave Baltimore City Public Schools 35, 40 years of service. I have to my left my cousin, Charnee Bowens, who has also been in the system for over 20 years. I have my brother, Milton Garnes, to my right, who is an educator and who's been in the system for about 20 years. And then we have close friends of the family. We have Miss Andrea Chavis, who's been in the system, I'm not sure how many years, but you said 13? 13 years. And so, I know that we're here to discuss Meltrek, but, Meltrek is an educational tool. And I figured, if I'm going to come and speak about Meltrek, then I have to bring with me educators who can attest to the power of Meltrek and how Meltrek is impacting the lives of young black children.
All right, let's start here. What would you say, Dr. Maa't, is a proper definition of education?
Well, if I had to define education, I would use the words of Dr. Amos Wilson. He defined education as, he said that the function of education is to maintain the biological survival of a people and to advance their interests, defend their interests, and enhance their quality of life. And so he said that if your education does not function in those terms, then it is miseducation. And that is why we as a people, Black people, are in the condition that we are today, because we have been systematically miseducated for decades. And so that's why today you see what you see.
But here's the thing. Now we're at this point of consciousness, right? We got this great emergence of knowledge that is so accessible, whether, it's not just about taking a walk to the library anymore. We hear speakers, you're on a speaking circuit and whatnot. We can go online to find everything.
Absolutely.
How is it that we could become so advanced on some level, and then when it comes to the fundamental skill set of teaching, it seems like there's a ball that's been dropped. There seems like there's something that's missing, where the children that we are teaching are no longer connecting with the curriculum that we are teaching. What's happening?
Where we dropped the ball. I think we dropped the ball when we stopped, or when we neglected to erect our own educational institutions. That's where we dropped the ball. Dr. Carter G. Woodson said in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro, he said that Blacks are the only group of people who take their most precious possessions, their children, and ask their oppressors to educate them and to mold their minds. So we dropped the ball, during Brown versus Board of Education, when we fought to integrate the public schools. Instead of fighting to integrate the public school system, what we should have been doing is erecting our own educational institution. And we also dropped the ball with the curriculum. The curriculum that is being taught to our children is a Eurocentric based curriculum.
Right.
It's not an African centered curriculum. So the disconnect with our children, they can't connect with Columbus. They can't connect with Abraham Lincoln. They can't connect with George Washington. They can't connect with any of these people, And so I think that the disconnect came when A, we didn't erect our own educational institutions, and B, when we teach, or when we decided to teach our children, a curriculum that is an African centered, a curriculum that does not involve them, a curriculum where they don't see models of excellence that look like them, a curriculum where they're taught about who they are and what their legacy of competence is. And so that's where I believe that we dropped the ball.
I want to bring in your mom and Miss Anna Bailey Scribner, who served as the principal for Harlem Park Elementary. She's an educator, longtime educator. I love principals because they can give you that insight like nobody else. And and Miss Anna, I had a chance to work at Dunbar Middle School when it was Dunbar Middle, right next door to Dunbar High School. And the principals that were there, Miss Statham, Miss Jones, I remember them vividly, because these were women that you can tell they believed that education is the key, was the key, and can still be the key. But now there's all of these other things that are happening. As from a principal standpoint, when you're walking into that building and you know that you're responsible for the cultivation, the nurturing of the next generation, what is it that needs to be considered, especially for any new educators, especially for those who've been in the system a long time and been trying to do so many things, but have kind of been beat down in the process? What needs to be done to keep that motor going?
Well, first of all, we have to have dedicated administrators, dedicated teachers, and that's one thing that we don't have now. The teachers that we have now, most of them are coming from the residence program.
Okay.
Whereas they're coming out of another career. So as they come out of this other career, they have they have a degree from that's not an educational degree. So you talked about people of other color coming in. So in that program, you may have 100 teachers, but out of those 100 teachers, you may only have 1 or 2 African American people in that program, because
Wow.
they said that they don't qualify. So they may take 98 Caucasian, and they may take 2 black. Now
that's by design. That's actual fact. It comes with, that we see this all happen all the time.
Yes, you see it all the
Wow.
time.
Wow.
So you had mentioned that you have more Caucasian teachers in the public school system. That's why we have them here. So so you have there. It's a training ground. So they come in and they get paid for going to college to be certified in education, and they pay back, so many years to the school system. But in the meantime, they're going to school and they're teaching our children during the day. So management is a problem. They can't control the children. So classroom management is a big problem.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the management, then you can't teach the children. Along with that, they have to have professional development in order to learn how to teach the various skills and strategies to teach the children. And the sad part about it is our children are losing in the process of all of this happening. So you wonder what's going on with the children. They're losing in that process.
Yeah.
And then after some teachers get frustrated because of classroom management, and these young people, they drop out of education. So you may have a classroom with a substitute for a number of months before or the whole year because the teacher can't take it anymore, and they leave. And then those that stay through the program, they end up leaving, going to the county or somewhere else because the county will take them then because they are now certified.
Miss Anna, but here's the thing, though, and as I'm listening to you, I'm wondering, the education of children in general, this has been around for some time now, especially here in the city of Baltimore. And for us to still be dealing with some of the same systemic issues year in, year out, I mean, it's beyond just disheartening. It's almost like, okay, why is there such a high level of incompetence at this point? If we know that there's funding, schools need to be funded. We know that schools need books. We know facilities need to be built up, infrastructure. We know that there needs to be classroom, teachers need professional development. Why do we keep going through this thing year in and year out with all of these same challenges? And, I have a son, he's 4 years old. He's about to go to school in September. And it's like thinking to myself, am I going to have the same conversation 50 years from now? Like we've been having for the past 50 years since Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yes.
Are we still talking about separate and unequal? I mean, are we still going to continue to be having the same issues 10 years in Baltimore City talking about, hey, you know what, the funding, we just got to figure it out?
Well, you have to, if you know, Baltimore City had been in a deficit, right?
Yes,
you've
ma'am.
heard about that.
Yes, ma'am.
And
that's been for 10 years?
It's been for a while. We go around the same circle.
Yeah.
And what government Holden, what he said was very true. He said Baltimore City gets more money than all the other LEAs. What's going on here? But Baltimore City money has been mismanaged. A lot of that money does not filter down to the classroom.
That's right.
That's part of the problem. It's not filtered down to the classroom. So therefore, the children aren't getting what they need. The schools aren't getting what they need to proper educate the children.
Okay.
So
Now, when I hear that, let me just tell you what my leadership radar says to that. We need to fire some people.
That's right.
Either we need to fire some people because they can't do the job, or we need to lower some salaries and start lifting salaries in other places. Because if it's top heavy, if the system is top heavy, and then, by the time it gets down to a brother like Anthony, he got to stretch and figure it all out for his budget, for his classroom. But everybody at the top is getting $150,000, nearly $200,000 just to, to look like they're doing something. Then that's a real problem. When he's the one on the front lines, when he's the one in the classroom each and every day.
And that is true. The money is just not coming down to the schools.
Wow.
The teachers are spending a lot of money. They're buying supplies in order to teach the children properly, and that really should not be.
Right.
And the budget that the schools have, you wonder whether you're going to have Xerox paper to last the whole school year. So a lot of teachers, they're writing grants. And with these grants, they're asking for Xerox
Teachers
papers.
are writing grants.
Yes, the teachers are writing their own grants
Wow.
in order to get supplies for their classroom.
Wow.
Yes, and that shouldn't be. with the money that's coming, the Title I money and all the money that's coming into this system, it should go right on down to the schools and the classroom where we can properly teach our children.
That's absolutely mind blowing that you're saying these things. I mean, it's true, but it's just mind blowing. Dr. Maa't, real quick before we get to the rest of our wonderful guests, because I mean, seeing the disparities and the challenges that your mom, Miss Anna, had just pointed out. I mean, I'm assuming that also led to the development of the Meltrek educational resource. Is that correct?
Yes, it sure did. The basis of education should be knowledge of self. Any educational system at the base, it should transmit at least an identity, and which we call knowledge of self. And I feel like the current curriculum does not transmit self-knowledge to our children. And that is the whole objective of Meltrek. Meltrek was created to teach children who we are, to teach the world who we are as African people. I know some people say, "Oh no, Doc, I'm an African American," but I just say, "Hey, you are an African in America, but nonetheless, you are an African." But we need to teach our children who they are.
Yeah.
And so that was the whole objective of Meltrek. I know that right now, with the current curriculum, they don't get that. They're not taught who we are as a people. They're taught it's a Eurocentric based education, and so they're taught a Eurocentric version of history. And so what Meltrek does is give children an African perspective of history.
Yeah.
And so we created Meltrek, or produced our first film in 2014. And that film is called Exploring Ancient Africa. And the objective of that particular film is to teach children that the history of people of African descent does not begin with slavery.
I want to bring something up for the minister, because you're right on target. When the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, he has always talked about proper education, but one of the things he said is, quote, "Education is supposed to be the proper cultivation of the gifts and talents of the individual through the acquisition of knowledge. Knowledge satisfies our natural thirst for gaining that which will make us one with our maker." So that totally, the minister said that it is the natural way of a human being to want to learn. So when you talk about black children, they're saying that they don't want to learn, that is unnatural. Something is something is wrong. Okay. So then he says, so true education cultivates the person, mind, body, and spirit by bringing us closer to fulfilling our purpose for being, which is to reflect Allah, God. The second purpose for education after self-cultivation is to teach us how to give proper service to self, family, community, nation, and then to the world. Wow. And so what you're saying to me and what the minister's saying is like right there. It's right there. It starts with the knowledge of self.
Absolutely.
It starts with that.
Absolutely. And so we created Meltrek to clear up a lot of historical misconceptions regarding people of color. For centuries, the world has been taught the myths of traditional Eurocentric teachings as it relates to people of color. So a lot of people believe that our children are taught that history begins with slavery. They don't know that our history goes beyond what I call the Maa't period. You have children who grow up believing that Africans are a zero contribution race. When you're sitting in math class and you're learning about the Pythagorean theorem, and you're learning about the area of a square or of a sphere or of a circle, they're telling you that all of these great mathematical functions came from Greece, when in actuality, the Africans were responsible for developing a lot of these formulas. And we have evidence of this with the Ron's mathematical papyrus, which is dated to 1900 BCE, the Berlin papyrus, the Moscow papyrus. So we have mathematical documentations that predate Europeans. But yet when our children learn math, they don't learn it from an African perspective. They learn it from a European perspective. So Africans have contributed heavily to the world, but that's not taught via the European curriculum. So Meltrek intends to teach children about the contributions that people of African descent have made to the world. We're also clearing up the misconception that Africans never traveled the seas until slavery. You have children who believe that the first time Africans were on boats was during the transatlantic slave trade.
Wow.
And that's not true.
Wow.
You know, we have boats that date back 4,000 years. You have the papyrus ship in the Pyramid of Khufu. You have the Dafuna canoe in Nigeria. You have great explorers like Tutmosis III and Abu Bakr and Alonso de Illica. So you had a lot of African people who traveled the seas thousands of years before the Europeans, but our children aren't taught that. So Meltrek is intended to definitely clear up a lot of historical misconceptions. Another objective of, can I continue?
Yeah, we're going to take a quick break, though.
Okay.
We got to take a quick break.
Because I was getting ready to go.
Yeah, you know, that's all good. Because I also want to bring in, you know, when we get back from break, I want to bring in some of the folks that are assisting with the Meltrek production.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, this is a great resource that I think that a lot of people should be, you know, supporting and definitely privy to. And more importantly, you know, it's a great conversation starter. At the end of the day, and we're going to go to break. At the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves the question, how serious are we about changing the paradigm of educating our children? You know, it's like it would be insanity for us to put our education or our ability to learn in the slave master's hands.
That's right.
And then expecting him to give us what they call a proper education. That's insanity.
Yes, it is.
On a very, very fundamental level. You're going to give a man who hates you, who have killed you, raped, robbed you, and you're going to tell him to educate you? Now, here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. On the other side, I like to talk about what should be the strategic alternative to that. Is it charter schools? Is it independent schools? You know, of course, the nation, we have the University of Islam. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the first thing he did as once he really got the Nation of Islam started in the 30s, he set up the University of Islam. Because we know that the real future belongs to the babies, but they have to be taught. Right. So we'll get into the conversation on the other side. Plus, I want to get your thoughts as well, Dr. Maa't, about what we're seeing in America, the hatred, the deep-seated hatred, and how do we have a conversation about race with black children in 2017? We'll have that conversation as well. Stay tuned. A whole lot more in the second half of the Final Call radio show here on your source for cool jazz and more, WEAA 88.9 FM and WEAA.org, the voice of the community. We'll be right back.
Productions presents Meltrek, Episode 1, Exploring Ancient Africa.
We're going to a different time zone, where our ancestors always sat on the throne. We're going to a different time zone. We're going to a different time. We're going to a different time zone. We're going to a different time. We're going to a different time zone, where our ancestors always sat on the throne. Yeah, and I'm talking about you and me. Our pigmentation considered greatest in royalty. So rise up, sons and daughters of a KB land. It's time to claim our riches and take back our land. So come and take this journey, and when you come back, tell your friends and family all about the Meltrek. Meltrek, 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 Meltrek. It's time to take it back to the basics. And talk about the Meltrek. The great lakes reading, the original Garden of Eden, where the oldest bones of man was found. Just look around, paradise to the flesh, nothing less than the best. Vegetation on this earth, priceless is what it's worth. That's why we building cities and homes, statues out of stone. Bet you thought that all the great structures were in Rome. Travel further south, the Zulus where you at. They had many keys for Shaka, put them on a map. A warrior heart, he changed the whole fight style. Caught a buffalo and led his men through the crowd. I could hear them coming, I could hear them chant. Hey man, them boys on a rant. Back in 3000 BC, the Nile Valley was the place to be for you and me. The Nile River gave abundantly to human beings. I'm speaking of the ancestors that they were true. You can find it on the temples, pyramids, and Tekkens. We develop papers so you can learn these lessons. If they can, we can, but you gotta take it back. Learn your history with me through Meltrek. Let your mind evolve. Take pride in who you are, to let the world see you stand tall. Over West, there are 3 places that stuck out. Mali, Sungay, Ghana, I'm talking about, no doubt. There were many more we could explore, but you're here for a limited time to take the tour, so let's go. Walk with me. Let's walk in their shoes. Great comes from great, but you gotta pay dues. No snooze, cause you're gonna miss the shit and regret, but we gonna get your minds in check with Meltrek. Meltrek, 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 Meltrek. It's time to take it back to the basics, and talk about the Meltrek.
That's what it is. This is Meltrek, and you're tuned into the Final Call radio show here on your source for cool jazz and more. WEAA 88.9 FM and WEAA.org, the voice of the community. I'm your host, Brother Farajii Muhammad, joined by our wonderful co-host, Brother Anthony Pena. We are joined by Dr. Oya Maa't and the wonderful family of Dr. Maa't, who have come in and just to provide a really, really insightful conversation, man. And it is hard for me to keep my composure because when you start to really go deep into how far this rabbit hole goes in terms of keeping the truth out of the hands of the people, in terms of seeing how, just the level of incompetence on so many high levels of the educational system, it makes you just want to just scream. I mean, it just makes you get so upset because at the end of the day, black boys and black girls are having their lives shaped by falsehoods, and they're having their lives shaped by ignorance. And I'm talking about inside the school, not even out in the streets. And so we have to have a different paradigm set up at this point. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught that we must educate our own. He taught that. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan continues in that same vein, saying that we must establish our own institutions. And Anthony, we're going to get back into talking with our guests, but I've seen you on social media, brother, talking about, just expressing some of your frustrations of being a part of the system and whatnot. And you were like, you said it many times, you said, man, I think I'm about to just open up my own school. I mean, it's understandable, brother. Right. It's definitely understandable. And the worst part of this, family, black folks, man. This is black folks. Man, black folks are in charge of the system.
Well, they're black on the outside, but in the inside, they have a white mindset.
That's right.
And so the reality is, Baltimore. I'm not a Baltimorean. I'm from Boston, and Boston's very racist for people that didn't know. But one thing I realized is that forced Boston people, Haitians, Jamaicans, blacks, to come together and have their own areas they own. So you know that's Haitian town. You know that's a West Indian food. That's what we were raised in, that culture. So when I came to Baltimore, I'm like, who owns what? I can't tell because all I see is Koreans. I see Jewish people. I see Russians. I see everybody except us only anything. In Baltimore, you see three things in each corner: a church, liquor store, and a chicken spot. Why? So we wonder why the tax base is so low when people know that you don't own anything. So when people were saying on the uprising in 2015, when we were both out there, they're tearing down their own communities. No, they're not. They don't own none of those communities.
They don't own nothing.
They're not tearing down anything.
Can we make a mental note? How come North and Pennsylvania still look the same way?
Thank you. It looks the same.
It looks the same way since for like 30 years.
Since
man.
the 67 riots, 68 riots. So it's interesting that when we have a lot of people in charge, yes, you have a black mayor, you have you used to have a black commissioner, you had a black city council president, you have a black superintendent of schools. But the reality is, they all function off a 20th century mindset with 21st century expectations.
Beautiful.
That cannot happen.
All right, now I want to bring in our other special guests. We have Sister Andrea Shavers and Sister Charnee Bowens. So I want to start with Ms. Shavers because Ms. Shavers, we were just talking a little bit offline because you work in the school system. You're an educator. You see what's happening. You're in a different county, not in Baltimore City, but you're in Baltimore County. And one of the big things that that you pointed out, which I think needs to be emphasized, is that. And we said it earlier, but when things are happening all around the students, you said they bring that to school and that it is the responsibility of the educator, the teacher, to not just provide or give information, but then to address whatever issues or whatever challenges or whatever that may be on their mind. It's the responsibility for the teacher to use that as a teachable moment. Talk to us a little bit. Let's go deeper on that.
So when I first started teaching, the school system that I worked in, the kids looked just like I did. However, they were coming in with loads of baggage.
And if y'all saw her face when she said that.
And it was
for the folks in radio land, y'all don't know. You know how the black women look when she says certain things, eyes start twitching and
it was because I'm from Connecticut, people automatically assume that, coming from an environment in Connecticut, I didn't know anything about what it was to teach inner city kids. And spot on everything that anybody had ever said to me about teaching Baltimore City kids or urban children was true. I had no clue. So when I started in the classroom, day in and day out, before I could teach anything, I had to address the elephants in the room. Not one elephant, but there were multiple issues that I had to address before I could even begin a lesson.
Your teaching career, did it start in the city and then it moved into the county, or how did that work?
I did start in the city.
You started in Baltimore City?
I did start in Baltimore City.
Gotcha.
Yep. But that's where I learned, before I could teach content, I had to first address the needs of the students who were in front of me. And the students who were in front of me had to become my babies. And anyone who knows me knows that my babies are my babies. I have 2 children of my own, but even my kids will hear me talk about my babies. And they know they're my students, but at the same time, my babies were coming in with all this stuff.
What kind of challenges, or what would be the baggage that the students would bring? Or what would be the most common baggage, or if there is a common baggage?
The common baggage was mom was missing because it was that time of the month. So they would see mom come in and look for whatever money was coming in, and then mom would take said money, and they wouldn't have seen mom all weekend.
Okay.
And then you had to deal with the I didn't eat, or it was lack of supervision or lack of medical care. I remember having this one particular student, he had never been to the dentist. and he was in the 7th grade, and his teeth would literally fall out in class. And I'm asking, what is going on? But I'm thinking with my Connecticut mind, both my parents work. I had double dental insurance. So not going to the dentist was like far-fetched for me. But for this particular student who would come in, and he was filthy, but he had a smile that would light up a room, and he was always happy.
So how would you address that as an educator? What would you say to those students to give them some sort of comfort or reassurance?
I showed up every day. That's right. The first 2 years I taught in the city, I had perfect attendance.
Wow.
I showed up every day because I knew that there were going to be multiple students who were expecting me to show up. No, they may not have liked me, but I was consistent. I showed up, and they knew that I cared. And that is the same for whether I'm working in the city or whether I'm working in the county. My kids know that I care. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to do everything I can to keep my word. And I know I'm not going to sugarcoat anything with them. They know that they can come to me and they can get the truth from me. So despite whatever the county tells me about, oh, well, you're supposed to give them this information about what's going on in the world around them, when they walk into my classroom, they know they can bring to me whatever issues they haven't been able to get addressed that day during the period that they have with me. And it's not going to be a beat-up session on whoever or whatever is going on around them. But I'm going to let them lead the conversation.
I like it. I like it a lot. And you know what? It's that type of commitment that's necessary right now. I want to go to Miss Bowens. Miss Bowens, you've been in the system as well. And as we talk about bringing that extra baggage, let's look at what's happening right now in this country politically. We're talking about Charlottesville. Monday, we're not in school, but there needs to be a conversation. Or how do you approach to have these conversations? How do you make sure that the students understand that their education is a tool to give them that level of empowerment to get through these tough times?
That's difficult, and I say that, and it's honestly difficult because you are confined, and I say that as an educator. Once you go in and you see that the students need some sort of conversation about what's going on around them in the world,
sure,
you get a document saying that you can only say A, B, and C. So as an educator, you have to actually take a chance on your career, to be honest.
Wait a minute. Hold on.
I'm just being honest. You have to take a chance and say, listen, okay, this is what's going on in the world, and we have to talk about it in this box. We have to talk about it in this box.
But you're saying that the system, the educational systems, the leadership has created a situation where if we were in school right now, if children were in school right now, and they go back to school tomorrow, like you couldn't talk about what happened in Charlottesville.
We could not have an open discussion about it. It would definitely have to be structured in a way.
Scripted.
Very scripted and structured. So I couldn't just have an open conversation. How do you feel? Well, how do I feel? It has to be a conversation where, somehow something productive comes out of it.
And not even taking sides. It could just be like, hey, y'all all right?
Correct. we can have an objective conversation. But you have to realize once you open that door, you don't know what's going to come out of it.
Right. That's the fear that the system has.
Correct.
Gotcha.
And I think even in this country, we have swept race relations under the rug so long. We're scared to have the conversation. And since we don't have the conversation, it bows up to the surface, and now you're forced to have the conversations.
Right.
So you have to say something about it, and again, you just have to be strategic on how you approach the students about it, but we have to have the conversation. So
these experiences have definitely contributed to the fact that you ladies, Miss Shavers and Miss Bowens, that you are part of Meltrek, because you both play characters in the production, right?
Absolutely.
So what's your character?
I am Miss Lofton. I'm the teacher.
You're the
I am.
That's a lot of acting you had to do.
It is. I had to step out of my box.
You had to step out your box.
I'm just saying.
Get some training.
Absolutely.
Spend some time with some teachers.
Yes, absolutely.
Come on, get out of here.
Yes.
And Ms. Shavers, what's your character in Meltrek?
So I do not play a character. My son Kanan plays Bunchy in the Meltrek series, the second episode.
So, okay. So you're the parent of Bunchy.
I am the parent of Bunchy.
Oh, nice. That's great. That's great.
I am. Yes.
I want to shift gears because, we also have young brother Isaiah Lewis, who is here with us. He's a co-founder of Everything in Life. Isaiah, first thing, I'm so happy to see you as a young brother because I actually saw you a few weeks ago when we were at Connections, and you were a part of the conversation about stopping the violence and whatnot. But how old are you, brother?
I'm 17.
17.
Yeah.
17 years old. Tell us a little bit about yourself, like what school and everything that you go to and all that represent.
All right. Well, I'm 17 years old, and I'm a co-founder, vice president of EdAnime Productions. I'm also a producer of Meltrek, and I voiced Bunchy and Chen in episode 1, and I just voiced Chen in episode 2. Kanan stole my role. My voice got a little bit too deep to play a child character, so I had to give the role up.
So they couldn't just draw you like another character.
Yeah, so they
sorry.
They said sorry, you ain't make the cut. So
you coming to work one day? No, I'm sorry.
I go to Mount St. Joseph High School now. I go to a private school. I went to public school pre-K through 8th grade. So a lot of things that y'all are talking about, I actually experienced firsthand. I went to Deer Park Middle School.
Very familiar, yeah.
And then I went to Featherbed and Johnny K Elementary School, which are in Woodlawn. So I went to Baltimore County schools. Right. But a lot of things you guys are talking about, I experienced firsthand in those schools. Like at Deer Park, we had a different principal every year I was there. We had a different principal every year, and
I know that burns Miss Anna up.
No stability.
No stability. We had a different principal
every year.
Every year. First year we had a male, and then we had a different female the next 2 years. I was there for 3 years, and then as far as the education itself, we learned about Copernicus discovering that the world is circular. But when they mention that, they don't mention that the Dogon people discovered that the world knew that the world was circular thousands of years ago. We learn about Pythagoras, like Dr. Maa't was saying, but we don't learn about the African mathematical systems in Africa thousands of years ago. We learn, it's like in every subject you can find, even in history, there's certain things that you will learn about, but you always learn about it from a European perspective, and I feel like that really, that doesn't benefit the children in the schools because we're not learning about our accomplishments.
I'm blown away by you, Isaiah, because the fact is you're 17 years old, you're over top of this larger production that's teaching about history in a way that's very entertaining, but at the same time very informative. Right. So I love the fact that you're doing it. I'm wondering for young brothers like you, right, or your circle of friends, are they like coming to you in a way and saying, you know, Isaiah, I was thinking about some stuff, man, and you know what, you were right. Do you have these conversations with them, or is it like, man, it's just school, it is what it is, and I'm just on to something else?
Yeah, I have with my friends. I tend to have these type of conversations with them. Even the friends that aren't people who are like. I have friends who are stuck in like the party life, things like that, but we still try to have those type of conversations. But what I learned coming from a public school going to a private school, those conversations became much more. They happen more often. And in public school, they would tell you not to talk about politics. In Deer Park, we start arguing about politics or something like that. Don't talk about it. And they start talking about like race relations stuff in public school. Don't talk about it because it's education that's trying to benefit everybody by like not letting people tell their opinions. But in my school,
can you say that for us one more time, brother?
In public school, it's trying to benefit everybody by not letting people share their opinions, so they're not trying to offend anybody. But in my school now, I had a modern American class last year, Mr. Campbell. We talked about. In his class, we always made sure that we talked about what was going on now. Now, my school is 70% white now. So I'm a minority. So I may not always like what the other kids were saying, but we had the conversation. I understand their viewpoint.
Correct.
And I was able to argue and change minds at the same time. And those are things I wasn't able to do in middle and elementary school.
So what's your goal at this point? And we got a few moments left in tonight's broadcast. What would be the big goal for Meltrek right now? What is the things that you want, parents and students listening to tonight to take from this conversation?
I want Meltrek to be able to teach about our accomplishments, about Black and African American accomplishments, and get to the right people so that we can change the school system and make it so that these things can be taught in the school, so we can better the self-esteem of children in the public school system.
Excellent. All right, we got our final guest. He's been quiet all night, but I want to bring in Mr. Milton Garnes. Just want to give just a few moments, Brother Milton, because you've been hearing the conversation, you've been nodding in agreement. But what's your take on this whole issue that we're seeing at this point? People are asking, okay, Meltrek seems like a good resource. It's just the start. How do we move forward to making this accessible to all schools? How do we move forward to making, to really, changing the whole education paradigm? Do we start with charter schools? Do we start with, where do we go from here?
That's a good question. I was always taught that the first school was at home. Home is the first school, so it starts with us. It starts with us as parents, as a community, and just being able to view this video. Yes, we need it in a larger classroom setting. However, we know it's politics with getting into a school.
Yeah.
We need to start at home.
Are you an advocate of homeschooling?
I'm an advocate of homeschooling if the situation is right. Meaning that if you have parents who are positioned to provide an adequate homeschool setting, I'm for it. Okay, but I think there's a purpose in having a school. There's a purpose in having educators, and I do believe in a system. And as you stated before, if I'm not mistaken, why aren't we looking at our own schools? Why aren't we looking at having some kind of arrangement where we're teaching our children more?
Yeah.
Opportunities should be there for us to do that.
Sure.
And so Meltrek is a perfect example of that opportunity through that type of media. My children love to watch television on occasion when they are allowed to, and so why not pop in a tape or pop in a CD and have conversation?
I love it. Dr. Maa't, we got a couple of moments. I'm just blown away by the brilliance sitting around the table right now. Real talk. How can people get this Meltrek's, whether it's in their public school, charter school? How can folks get access to this?
Well, they can access Meltrek by visiting EdAnime Productions.com. So that's EDANIME Productions.com, or just go to Google and type in Meltrek in the search bar, and all of our information will come up.
I am so happy and grateful and thankful for all of you. Anthony, you got any final words for our special guest here tonight?
Just thank you. We need people more like Dr. Maa't and the crew. I'm excited by Isaiah because the future is in him. If he can do it at 17, I'm amazed at. Can you imagine how many more Isaiahs we can make?
Yeah.
By him being the example. So never doubt what the media talks about. Oh, black kids here killing each other. Yeah, that's part of it. But a lot of black kids are doing great things, and we're not talking about that. I'm sorry, not kids. They're not GOAT. Children, our black children are doing great things, and we need to spread the word about that.
That's what's up right there. That's what's up. Well, Dr. Maa't, Brother Isaiah, Brother Milton, Sister Kelsey, Miss Anna, Sister Anna, Sister Andrea, Sister Charnee, thank you so much for being on the Final Call radio show tonight to have this conversation. I mean, there's so much more that we could talk about, but I feel like people know what to do. It's just a matter of us making a collective decision to do it.
That's right. That's right.
And I feel like that's what needs to happen. But guess what? I truly believe, I'm a spiritual man, God is going to force us to do something for ourselves. That's right. Whether it's through President Trump or whether it's through some other force or circumstance or person, his hand is involved. So we're at this point that if we don't do something for ourselves, we are going to suffer the consequences of, the ignorance You know what I mean? And I think, honestly, I know people might think, hey, man, Minister Farrakhan is racist. No, he's not racist when he said, and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad is not racist when he said, we must separate at this point because our very livelihood depends on it. We cannot take on this anymore. We can't bear the brunt and the pain and the suffering that America has and then not separate from all that is American to create all that is good for us. That's where it is. All right. Next week, we'll continue the conversation. Allah willing, we'll have our brother student minister Carlos back in the building to talk to us about what he saw. Also, next week, we got to do a very special tribute to our dear beloved brother, iconic comedian, educator, Brother Dick Gregory. I can't even talk about him without having Minister Carlos back in the building because he is the historian, so he's going to have to give us some insight about Dick Gregory. So that's all coming up on next week's edition of the Final Call Radio Show. I want to thank all my special guests. I want to thank Ty for making it sound so good tonight, and I certainly want to thank you for tuning in. Up next is some great programming, so stay tuned for that. But always remember this, family. Make sure you follow the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on social media and continue to tune into the Final Call where you'll get uncompromising truth. On behalf of Brother Student Minister Carlos Muhammad and the laborers and family of Muhammad Maa't number 6, we hope and pray that you have a safe and productive weekend, and we look forward to sharing with you more of the great teachings next week on another edition of the Final Call Radio Show here on your source for cool jazz and more, WEAA 88.9 FM at WEAA.org, the voice of the community. Assalamu alaikum.